I once worked front desk at a public pool. It was horrible, but one interaction stands out, both for how malicious my compliance was and for the fallout. Our swim team had just launched and parents came to sign their kids up for every single thing they could do because it meant after-school activities and freedom. Yay! My responsibility was the form. First, I had to help design the form because the design the city gave us, made by a woman who was making more than minimum wage as a pool desk caddy, was not enough for my boss and my dumb, but let her know I could make MS Word sit up and do tricks-free cookies. Once the form was approved, and by then I was taking proofs home to burn his catharsis, my job was to make sure that every single parent had signed the form and paid their fee. Enter Daddy T. His daughter was on the swim team, and he had this charismatic grin and confident way of speaking that immediately put my alarm bells into danger. Will Robinson. He was a little too smiley, a little too happy, and vaguely familiar. There was something kind of off about him. I wasn't sure what it was, but it made me want to be as far under his radar as possible. Unfortunately, while this kid was signed up for swim team, he still needed to sign the form and pay for her entry, which meant I needed to interact with him. Most females and not too few males know the gazelle on the belt feeling. Something is off. Something had the hair on the back of your neck standing on end. You don't know what it is, and the rules of social interaction demand you keep your mouth shut and play nice. The guy spends a few minutes of charismatic smiles. I had never seen teeth like that outside of Channel 10 news presenters, acting like he's having trouble reading the form. I designed the form over the course of multiple painful weeks, and you know you would have to be severely brain damaged to have issues understanding it. My boss had me dumb it down to the point that a kindergarten student could know where to scribble a name approximation. And this guy is well-spoken and clean-cut, and he's got the sharpest and most familiar gaze I've ever seen. I cannot think of any reason for him to be this obtuse, honestly. And I begin to suspect he is hitting on me, which for multiple reasons has me creeped out by several orders of magnitude. I just want this guy to go away. Finally, after agonizing minutes of him struggling with a form that a 2-year-old could sign, he hands it back and says, still with that same confident, charismatic smile, "Read it to me." I was at a low point in my life. I hated every single thing about my life. I had untreated PTSD, and the thought of anyone hitting on me made me want to go scrub a layer of skin off. The realization that this guy had pinned me to a desk I could not leave until he signed the form made me want to punch him. But I needed this job, and my boss would grind me into flour and turn me into a concession stand special if I even pretended to stand up for myself. So instead, I complied. I shifted into happy customer service mode, and I read him that god-dang form. I summarized legalese. I dumbed things down from kindergarten to preschool. I did it all with the sweetest smile I could muster and tried to be about as asexual as the desktop computer right next to the counter window. I made it a point to be the most cheerfully helpful person and hoped that somehow this would translate to go the freak away. And it worked. He signed. He left. I breathed a sigh of relief. Until next week, when the form had to be supplemented by the sign-in sheet and the whole freaking song and dance repeated itself. He asked me to read him the god-dang sign-in sheet. And I did. With a smile. That couldn't have been more forced if he had a gun to my head. At this point I was heaping lit coals on his head and practicing my obtuse freak face. I might be a captive audience, but I would be Dongade before I let him know he got to me. I maliciously treated him like any other customer. I hated to see him arrive, and when he left I cheered. And this went on for weeks because every session the boss would need a new form signed, and every session that guy asked me to read it to him. And I managed it by channeling my inner robot. I even began highlighting his daughter's name. What kind of bad dad forgets his daughter's name? And our interactions became a game. Him trying to get me refusing to be got. It almost felt like chess. Then it came time to distribute the swim team gear. And that brought a whole new set of forms. Which meant the guy asked me to read him every single one of them. And just when I'm contemplating leaping out the nearest window while doing a full-body Silkwood decantum, he suddenly meets my eyes and this layer of pretense I hadn't ever noticed drops away. He has tears. Literal tears in his eyes. And he says, "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much." See, the entire time I had been maliciously complying with him. By being the best reader ever? I'd been struck by how familiar he looked, but I had never really watched the news. I just sat and read books while my parents watched it instead. Which is why I didn't recognize our local weatherman when he began bringing his daughter to swim practice. It's also why I didn't know why he had recently retired. He'd been diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, you see. And they'd just finished a round of surgery and chemo to save his life that they weren't sure would actually work. His odds sucked. It really had been all over the news. They even gave him a really nice, heartbreaking sound-off that I never watched because of my own depression and isolation. I found it on YouTube later. It's the kind of thing all of us would pray someone do and out of memory. He thanked me, because ever since his surgery, his ability to function had been compromised. He could mask most of the damage with his charisma and training, and usually could fake it till you make it with the best of them. But he'd lost a lot of his capacity to read. It was a struggle he'd obviously never faced before, and it frustrated him that after all his college education and decades being the face of the local weather, he suddenly couldn't even read a basic form for his daughter's swim team. And he was so thankful, he was crying, that I was taking so much time out of my day to help him. And not just to help him, but to be so unpatronizing. I had treated him like he was normal. He said that I made him feel sort of whole again. He made every effort to make it clear. He was genuinely, sincerely grateful for how helpful I had been. And I am suddenly reviewing every insult I thought about him. Every time I question his mental capacity or quality as a parent. He was so low that what I meant as a mockery and a punishment was, to him, a gift. I made him feel normal. There aren't words for that kind of shame. I thought it was a game. I really did. People still talk about how he touched lives. I know he touched mine. Well, first off, my condolences to the man in the story. I gotta admit, this is probably one of the most jarring twists I've ever read in a malicious compliance story. It really just kinda makes you think about things a little bit. At least it makes me do so. What does this story make you think about? Let me know in the comments below. Are you sure you want me to call the cops? Are you absolutely sure? OCM, this happened about 6 months into my tenure at the Vacation Inn. I had picked up the tricks of the trade pretty quickly and understood the underbelly of the hotel/bar world. As some of you may recall, Freddy's nightclub was the place to be. In any bar or nightclub scene, there is always a criminal element present, and Freddy's was no different. The squid taught me which of the regular women had a dress for sale, and if they were not regulars, he taught me how to spot them right away. He also informed me that they had a deal with Blart, the bar manager. Don't ask, don't tell. I learned to spot coke dealers, coke users, pimps, madams, undercover cops, etc. just by looking at them in their body language. Prostitution was always an ongoing issue to the point where the county sheriffs would set up sting operations about once every 3 months, both as Johns and Janes. No joke, this was the highlight of our PM shifts, as bad as it sounds. Before I go any further, this wasn't Breaking Bad meth prostitution. We were a 4-star hotel at the time, so 9 out of 10 Janes were beautiful women. I also learned that this is virtually the only difference between an escort and a prostitute. Anywho, Mr. Smith checks in by himself. Typical business guest. Middle age, white dude, nice suit and watch, shine shoes, etc. He hears the lobby music at Tequila and asks about the food and drink situation. I tell him hours of operation, menu, introduce him to the restaurant hostess, tell him about our 50-plus tequila section at the tequila bar, the whole 9 yards. He seems pretty unimpressed till I hit him with, if you want to stay up late though, you can stop by Freddy's. They're open till 2 a.m. I swear he was like a mutt that heard a slice of Kraft singles being opened. Freddy's, huh? What's the atmosphere? Tell him about the salsa music, dancing, drinks, etc. And he says, salsa music? Are there any Latin women to dance with? Plenty, Mr. Smith. Plenty of senoritas to dance with. Freaking guy. Anywho, fast forward to about 9 p.m. Mr. Smith had a few glasses of wine at dinner, a few tequilas at Tequila, and now he was on his way to Freddy's with a little more slide in his stride. You know, that very short-lived window between fun and lubricated to desperate and morose. As he's walking downstairs to Freddy's, the squid stops by the desk and says, "Hey man, watch out for Mr. Smith." He was a little too blunt with one of our regulars, asking if she'd go up to his room. I mean, that's a regular occurrence, so didn't faze me too much, but if the squid, one of the coolest and calmest people on the planet, is worried, then there is cause for concern. So down goes Mr. Smith to try and find himself a Latin señorita. It is roughly 10:15 p.m. when I see two familiar faces walking up the stairs. One of them is a very visibly drunk Mr. Smith, who had joyfully let go of the little sobriety he had, and Jane, a well-known dress merchant. As Mr. Smith gets closer to the front desk, he glances at me and gives me a not-so-subtle look of, "Freak yeah, I got one," and I return a grossly blatant abort mission head shake. Well, he obviously didn't heed my warning and proceeded up to his room. Fast forward about an hour and a half, I'm chit-chatting with the night auditor, telling him about the day, specifically about Mr. Smith. I would normally chill with Bobo the night auditor for about an hour and catch him up on the day, either smoke a cigarette, a joint, or both. He was the older, no-nonsense older guy from the Samoan story. Guess who we see stumble through the lobby? A half-dressed, messy-haired Mr. Smith comes up to the desk. He is fuming and says, "I need you to call the cops right now." Hey, take it easy, Mr. Smith. What's the matter? That idiot I took up to my room just took all my money while I was in the bathroom. She was a freaking hooker. I only gave her $100 and she took the rest. I mean, he's not wrong. But what could I do at that point, right? So I tell him, "Mr. Smith, sorry to hear that. You were in on it, weren't you?" "No, sir, I am most definitely not." Bobo comes up and is about to set him straight when I tell him it's cool, I got this. "Mr. Smith, think about what you are asking me to do. You want me to call the cops so you can report a prostitute taking all of your money instead of the $100 you agreed on?" He shouts and screams that we are in on it and he wants to file a report, blah blah blah. So I comply and call the police department. Of course, PD shows up, and at this point, PD and I are first name basis, and I explain what is going on. PD looks at me dumbfounded and I say, "Yeah, I know." So PD talks to Mr. Smith and asks the standard questions. Mr. Smith tells him that she had asked for $100 for her services. They made an agreement for what kind of services $100 would entail. And once services were rendered, he went to the restroom to wash up when he heard the door open and close. He walked out of the restroom to find Jane had taken over $500 from his wallet. PD gets the description and tells him, "No, sir, can you please put your hands behind your back? You are being arrested for solicitation." A very confused Mr. Smith says, "But why? I am the one who got robbed. You can't do this." Once reality sets in and he realizes he freaked up, he gets taken away with no incident. From any kind of situation, when there is a stranger in your room, I know myself, if there was somebody I didn't know in my hotel room, I'd probably be keeping a close eye on my valuables. Credit half my fees or I'm leaving. This happened during my time working in a call center for a cell phone provider. We had our fair share of jerks, but rarely got the chance to give them a taste of their own medicine. "Hello, thank you for calling phone provider. This is OP. How can I help you?" "My wife and I are upgrading our phones. You will waive half the upgrade fees or I'm leaving." "Oh, great. A credit demander. Wonderful. I would love to work with you. Please hold while I work with my supervisor to see what we can do." We had free range to credit, but we would get in trouble if we did it too much. So I would always do a chat consult with supervisors before crediting. I looped a supervisor in and asked if I can go ahead. The supervisor said I checked his account and he has the option for 2 credits for upgrade fees. How many did he want credited? Just 1. Supervisor says, "Well, I can't tell you what to do, but I would give him what he wants." A smile formed across my face as I took the call off hold. "I'm sorry for the hold, sir. We would love to credit you for the 1 upgrade free." See, was that so hard? No, not at all. You have a great day, sir. I've never been happier about issuing a credit. Man, it was that guy's lucky day. I wish I could be the receiving end of some of those kinds of credits. My girl wants to see those 2 bikinis and you will give me a deal. My family owned a couple stores on a beach that sold t-shirts, towels, and bikinis. The bikinis were a big seller, and we decided to mark them down for the week from $39.99 to $24.99. I put up a sign that showed the sale price, and roughly an hour later, a little kid knocked the sign down. Before I could replace it, a big, sweaty, intimidating gentleman comes up to me and slams his hands on the counter. Yo, my girl wants these 2 bikinis, and you're going to give me a deal or I take my business elsewhere. I was going to tell him about the sale, but once he demanded a deal and he tried to intimidate me with his size and slamming on the counter, I decided against it. I will give you 2 for $60. Done. Completed the sale, and as the man was leaving, I put the sale sign back up. I only have one word to say, and that one word is sucker. My oldest daughter, wholesome compliance. This is short, but I think you may enjoy it. While I took my 2 youngest children for a walk, my wife left our oldest daughter home alone for about 15 minutes. My oldest is about 9.5 years old and is becoming more comfortable trying to stay at home by herself. When I got home from the walk, I found my daughter eating cookies at 10:30 in the morning. When my wife got home, she commented to my daughter that I told you not to raid the kitchen. My daughter's response was that her mom had said not to raid the refrigerator. So what I want to know is which of these stories was your personal favorite and why? Let me know in the comments below.